Pandavas Hastinapur. For the first time, Duryodhana was not looking forward to the battle the next day. It was the 18th fateful day of the war, and ended as swiftly as it had begun. When King Salya was felled by Yudhishthira and the last generals were killed, the Kaurava army lost all hope. And among the ruins of his army and all his dead brothers, stood alone Duryodhana, who fought to the death. Overwhelmed with grief, and having lost his will to live, Duryodhana was almost suicidal. As he burned with hate, anger, pain and repentance, he went into a pool to cool his body. The Pandavas, searching frantically for their last enemy, found him there and surrounded the pool, jeering at him and calling him a coward for hiding in the water to escape certain death at the hands of Bhima. With them was Krishna. Duryodhana stepped out of the water, his mace held high. "I am not hiding like a coward as you claim. I am cooling the fire burning in me for so long. I have no fear in me now, because I have no fear of losing. I have lost everything already. Yes, I shall fight you. I am alone, but I will fight the five of you together." Reminding him of all the injustices inflicted on them, Yudhishthira taunted him about the young, hapless Abhimanyu who, alone and defenseless, had been killed by a band of great warriors like him. Duryodhana heard him out, then snarled, "Enough of talk. It's time to fight once again." Then, leaping at Bhima as his first opponent, Duryodhana began his last combat. The duel was long and protracted as they matched each other in strength and skill, until the moment Krishna spoke the fateful words that were to decide the outcome of the fight. He reminded Bhima of his oath again, of how he had said he would smash Duryodhana's thighs, the same thighs on which Duryodhana had dared to invite the helpless Draupadi to sit. Hearing this, Bhima gave an infuriated war cry as memories of the outrage surged back. Then, in his rage, he smashed his mace below Duryodhana's waist and ripped his thighs apart mercilessly. Duryodhana's groans thundered as he writhed in pain. Placing his foot on the head of the prostrate Duryodhana, Bhima would have trampled him to death had Yudhishthira not stopped him. Leaving him to die a slow, agonizing death, the Pandavas left their cousin, who was still seething with anger and hate in his last dying moments. "Oh, Krishna, I will die as a true Kshatriya. I was a noble king and a brave warrior. I shall die in a few moments and meet my friend Karna and my brothers in heaven. But you and the Pandavas will live and suffer," he said, spitting out hate and venom for the man he believed was the cause of his destruction. And that was how Ashwadhama, Kripacharya and Kritavarma, the three survivors of the Holocaust, found him a few hours later. The gentle Ashwadhama, enraged about the brutal way his father and Karna had been killed, promised a terrible oath to the dying Duryodhana, that he would kill all the five Pandavas the same night, before the dawn of the next day. He went away to fulfill his promise and returned in a short while, triumphantly announcing, "The Pandavas are dead." When Duryodhana heard these words, he opened his eyes for a moment, more peaceful after hearing that his enemies were dead at last. Then, he declared Ashwadhama as the next supreme commander of the Kaurava army. He eventually died in the arms of Ashwadhama, who did not know that he had perpetrated a more heinous crime than the devious murders of his father and his best friend. The very night he had promised the dying Duryodhana that he would kill the Pandavas, Ashwadhama had set fire to the Pandava camp. He had attacked the 7 ill-fated men sleeping inside, kicking and stamping them mercilessly to death. At the break of dawn, Ashwadhama realized that it was not the Pandavas but the 5 sleeping sons of Draupadi and her 2 brothers, Drishtadhyumna and Shikandi, whom he had heartlessly trampled to death. When they learnt what had happened, the grieving Pandavas bayed for Ashwadhama's blood. They searched high and low for him but he could not be found. Uruvi was told about Duryodhana's excruciating death by Ashwadhama himself. The war had officially ended, Bhishma Pitamaha had breathed his last, but the search for the murderous Ashwatthama was still on. 3 weeks after the war was over, it was she who found him, or rather, it was he who came searching for her. Uruvi was gathering medicines at the camp and locking up the supplies when she saw a shadow against her tent. Knowing no fear, she stepped out to face the gory, bleeding visage of a tall man. She started violently and barely managed to stifle her cry of horror when she recognized the voice of the injured man, who said, "I want some medicine, sister. I am hurt." It was the soft undertone of Ashwatthama, the man who had painfully recounted each detail of Karna's last day and how he had died. Ashwatthama, the man whom Karna was closest to besides Shona and Duryodhana. The man who was Karna's everlasting friend. She took him inside. Ashwatthama's face was wet with blood, which made it difficult for Uruvi to find the source of his wound. And then she saw it. Right in the center of his forehead was a huge hollow from which he was bleeding profusely. It was the very spot where a glittering pearl once lay, the precious gem Ashwatthama was born with that blessed him with immortality. The gem was to protect him from death, disease, hunger and war, but it could not protect him from the wrath of the Pandavas. Uruvi slowly started cleaning the wound as Ashwatthama rasped, "They eventually tracked me down in the forests. They couldn't kill me as I am blessed with this wretched immortality, but they prized away the gem from my head to give to their grieving wife, Draupadi. Draupadi, whose 5 sons and 2 brothers you mercilessly killed." Uruvi shook her head in dismay. "Yet in the grief and pain you caused, I've heard she has forgiven you. But have you forgiven them, or yourself?" "I got what I wanted," he answered feverishly. "The Pandavas have no heirs now. I killed them all." He breathed. "Oh, Ashwatthama, what has happened to you?" cried Uruvi. "You were the kindest, the gentlest and the most just of them all. You were the man who could harm no one, think ill of no one, and yet today can you recognize yourself? You are what Duryodhana was, burning in the never-ending fire of hatred and fury. Why did you allow yourself to become such a monster?" "You call me a monster, sister," he cried in frustrated fury. "And were not the Pandavas more terrible demons to murder my father in that heinous way? Was Arjuna not a monster when he killed my friend Karna while his back was turned and he was grappling with the wheels of his stuck chariot? They were the ones who made me a demon. They talk about righteousness, but were they ever fair themselves? I wanted to kill the Pandavas, but I killed their sons instead, and I have no regrets. I am ready to bear Krishna's curse of finding no release from this life." "You murdered them in their sleep," said Uruvi sadly. "You killed each one of them and Drishtadhyumna and Shikandi by trampling them to death. You, gentle Ashwatthama, who hated it when anyone lashed even a horse. What has the need for revenge done to you?" Ashwatthama looked hard at her and finally said, "You were the most fiery lady I ever met, how can you so easily forgive the death of Karna? He didn't deserve to die that terrible death. And is that why you are hitting back? Would Karna have been happy to see you in the state you are today? No, brother, hate and anger are corrosive, they only allow evil to flourish. And the worst evil you have inflicted is on yourself, you have made the good man in you become evil." "The same words hold true for me as well," thought Uruvi, abruptly pausing in her statement. Had she, too, got so corrupted with hate, anger and resentment that she had forgotten how to grieve for what she had lost? Had she lost Karna as well as her innate faith and goodness? Would she end up being a bitter wreck, wallowing in antagonism and animosity all her living moments? Staring at Ashwatthama's distraught eyes crazed with utter hatred, Uruvi felt a prick of fear. She was afraid of herself now, she feared her virulence and her vindictiveness. Her face flushed with embarrassment as she recalled her abominable behavior at Karna's funeral, hard and unforgiving as she was now, 3 weeks later. She shivered, and it was not because of the cold wind outside. Swamped by her own uncertainties, Uruvi heard herself cautioning Ashwatthama, "Yes, Karna died by deceit, but by hating Arjuna, will I get my Karna back? I cannot spoil the sanctity of Karna's memory with rage and rancor. It would defile all that he stood for. Could you not have respected his memory?" Ashwatthama flinched, but Uruvi persisted, swabbing the wound stubbornly. "You were the son of Dronacharya, and today you are a fugitive, running away from the world. You tried to kill the unborn baby of Abhimanyu in Uttara's womb by targeting it with the dreaded astra of destruction. But fortunately, the baby survived, and he was born as Parikshit. So, the Pandavas have their heir, Ashwatthama. You could not save your father or Karna, but try to save yourself now. Ask for Draupadi's forgiveness and you shall seek redemption. You have come to me to heal your wound. I have done as much as I can, but I cannot stop the bleeding from this gaping wound in your mind. It runs too deep. It will bleed forever. Go to Draupadi, only she can help you." Uruvi turned around to apply some balm on his cleansed wound. But he was not there. He had left some time ago. Uruvi could not sleep anymore. Each time she shut her eyes, she saw the image of Karna standing tall against the battlefield. It was him again, with his thick mane, his sunset gold eyes, his twinkling earrings, walking towards her, with his gold armor blazing against the raging fire behind him, burning everything, everywhere. She saw the blood-spattered battlefield, with headless corpses heaped in the center, the cries of those mortally wounded screeching against the sunless skies. She realized she had been dreaming, but the dream was no different from reality. Dreaming about the terrible war, she was only seeing, in the harshness of waking, the senseless carnage, the blood and the pointless deaths of all those whom she loved and revered. There had been little reason for this meaningless war, the futile bloodbath and the hopeless future it harbingered. She vividly replayed the death of her husband, and a shudder ripped through her. She was senseless with grief, she couldn't think any more, and she wished she could escape from her everyday torment. How would she survive without Karna, without his affectionate laugh, without his teasing smile, without his reassuring kisses? "No," she screamed silently, "I cannot live without him. I see him everywhere, and I feel him near me. I can feel his breath, I can smell his scent, I can see his deep eyes laughing up at me, I can hear his soft laugh, I could just sink into his arms." Lulled by the lovely vision of her husband when he was alive, she thought she heard voices below her balcony. Vrushali's was the loudest. Uruvi sat up with a start. Why was the soft-spoken Vrushali talking with so much intensity? Vrushali had been almost mad with grief ever since her terrible losses, so Uruvi hurried out of the room to see what was troubling her afresh. The sight she met with stopped her in her tracks. Vrushali was arguing with Krishna, not allowing him to enter the palace. Trying to console her was Draupadi, and looking on helplessly were the Pandavas and Kunti. "Vrushali," Uruvi said urgently, rushing to her sister-in-law's side. "Let them come inside." "I don't want them here, Uruvi," Vrushali said shrilly. "I don't want any of them anywhere near us ever. They are murderers. They killed my Radheya, Shona and all my sons. They have heaped enough pain on us. What more do you want from us?" She rounded fiercely on the guests, her eyes glittering with unsuppressed fury. "I have lost my sons too," Draupadi interrupted softly. "And my brothers and my father. My loss cannot be your solace, but all of us are suffering, no one has been spared." Uruvi thought Vrushali would lose control on hearing Draupadi, but the raw anguish in Draupadi's voice seemed to calm the frayed nerves of the older woman. Draupadi was unusually quiet, more temperate than before, the fire in her completely quenched. She was more like ash after a devastating fire. Her eyes were dull, her face lined, and her long flowing mane was tied in an untidy knot. She stood stooped and lifeless, wretchedly unhappy. Vrushali looked suddenly exhausted. I wish we had never come to Hastinapur. I want to go back to Champanagari, she said plaintively. And she swept out of the room in a flurry, unmindful of the guests she had just been rude to. Please don't mind her, Uruvi murmured apologetically. She has still not recovered, she allowed her voice to trail off deliberately. She bowed low to Lord Krishna and said formally, what is the reason for your visit? The fact that all of you are present means it must be something important. It was Yudhishthira who stepped forward and said reverently, we have come to take you home, Uruvi. Home, she repeated, almost stupidly. And then what they were asking of her sank in. No, she said fiercely. This is my home. This is Karna's home. This is our home with his memories in every corner. This is my sanctuary. No, I cannot leave this place, she said more calmly. I can't live with you at Hastinapur. I am happier with my family here. In this house. Please, Uruvi, won't you ever forgive us? Broke in Arjuna urgently. He looked into her pale face, her sleep-deprived bleak eyes shadowed by pain and anxiety. She had a pinched look, making her wistful loveliness more fragile than before. Her eyes were vacant, but he sensed a silent accusation in them. Or, possibly it was his own sense of culpability making him imagine it. He could not rid himself of the guilt ripping him. He had killed his own brother. He had made this woman he once loved, a widow. Can you ever pardon me, Uruvi? He pleaded. I can never say that to Karna, but please make me feel better. Help me to regain my pride. I have repented for the awful crime I have committed. I have killed my own brother in cold blood. However much Krishna and my mother try to convince me that Karna was a doomed man and that he had faced death because of 6 other people, I can't forget how I alone was responsible for his death. The pain was familiar, she was acquainted with the self-flagellation, the self-castigation. It was guilt that was tearing Arjuna apart. She recognized the torment in his eyes and desperately wanted to end his suffering. But Arjuna, what Lord Krishna says is true. Karna was betrayed by other people, all of whom were responsible for his death, not just you. She said softly. It happened 6 times. First, at his very birth, his mother disowned him, keeping her honor above the self-respect of her firstborn child. As a young, unwed mother, she cast him into the river, forsaking him and leaving him to a certain death. Karna was killed the day he was born. And he died each time his mother refused to acknowledge him. Draupadi gasped at Uruvi's brutal forthrightness, but for a moment, a gleam of triumph flashed in her eyes. Uruvi had uttered the words that she had wanted to fling at her mother-in-law ages ago, time and again. Please stop, Uruvi, don't punish me anymore. How can you demean me in front of my sons now? Cried the Queen Mother of Hastinapur, raising a protesting arm as if to ward off the hurtful truth. I am not condemning you, Uruvi shook her head. Can't you see your sons suffering? Is your honor more important to you even now that your sons have to suffer a senseless guilt that is killing them slowly? Yes. I am being made to suffer for that single mistake of my life. I am asking for your forgiveness, but forgiving oneself is probably the most difficult task, and I haven't pardoned myself for that one fault of mine. But when can it be made right? I have already lost one son. She sobbed. So has Bhanumati. And Radha lost both her sons. Draupadi's 5 sons were killed in this war and Vrushali lost 7, she said impassively. Each one of us has lost someone most dear to us. That is exactly what I am trying to explain to Arjuna, Uruvi said quietly. Arjuna, you need not suffer from needless guilt. Karna was destined for that death. The three curses of the angry Brahmin, the earth goddess and, most importantly, Guru Parshurama's curse that Karna would forget the incantation of the Brahmastra when he needed it most, would be the second reason. The third time was when your father, Lord Indra, used deceit to rob Karna of the Kavak and Kundals. Again, for the fourth time, your mother was responsible for my husband's death when she revealed the truth of his birth at the time that suited her, just before the war. She crippled him with that truth, knowing that he would not raise a finger against his blood brothers. Moreover, she extracted a promise from him that he would not kill any of your brothers, except you. Likewise, that he would use a divine weapon only once against you. Arjuna recoiled, recalling how he had escaped Karna's fatal Bhargavastra and the Nagastra. Bhima gave a cry of pain and turned to Yudhishthira in despair. That is why he told us to go away. And I taunted him with my outrageous words. What terrible truth is this that we do not have the strength to face it? That is a truth we were denied so long but have to live with even longer, said Uruvi. The fifth time was when King Salya did not help him when the wheel of his chariot got stuck. And lastly, when all of this failed to kill my brave, hapless husband, it is Krishna himself who conspired to make sure Karna was killed. You, Arjuna, have killed a man already killed 6 times before by his own people. Uruvi halted briefly, filling the silence with her impassioned words, but her eyes were soft and melting, clouded by a deep sadness. Krishna, his face solemn, nodded his head in quiet agreement. Yes, Uruvi, I admit I made Arjuna kill Karna. But that was only because Karna, though the best of men, was helping the wrong side. And he was the sole danger to Arjuna. I regarded the mighty Karna not as Arjuna's equal but far superior to him. And that is why Karna needed to be killed with the greatest resolve. In energy, Karna was equal to Agni, the god of fire. He had the impetuosity of the wind, the speed of a shooting arrow. In anger, he could be the destroyer himself, and anyone who turned against Duryodhana earned his ire. He was as brave as a lion, he was a hero. Not even the gods could have killed him. He had to be killed by treachery. Uruvi's voice was gentle, almost kindly, as she spoke to Arjuna. Don't grieve for what you did, Arjuna. You are a warrior and Karna was your enemy. He had to be killed. If not him, it would have been you who would have died. And that would have been terrible too. Karna decided to accept his destiny, never losing his immense pride. His strength of inner conviction came from his self-belief. Despite what Krishna warned him about, he did not bend. In fact, Lord Krishna, he was one person who never succumbed to your appealing charm. Uruvi said with a slight smile. It was the first time she had smiled since the death of Karna, and Uruvi found herself a little surprised. She felt the last of her bitterness dissolving, it was almost like physical pain ebbing away. She felt relaxed suddenly, a certain soft light glowing within her. It was the radiance of forgiveness, of hopefulness. She walked up to Yudhishthira and folded her hands. Please don't take me away from my duties. I am needed here. It is not that my refusal stems from anger or hurt or spite, she said evenly. My place is here, with Radha, with Vrushali, and with the sick and the maimed. I can't think of going anywhere else. They need me. Uruvi, you are needed at the palace, said Yudhishthira with slow deliberation. Karna, as the eldest Pandava, was the rightful king of Hastinapur, and as his wife, you need to be there. And Vrishakhthu, as the son of Karna, is the heir apparent to the kingdom. He will wear the crown. And that is why you have to come with us. We want you to be with us. Please. Uruvi took each word uttered by Yudhishthira calmly. Krishna added, don't say no, Uruvi. The Pandavas and Vrishakhthu are the new hope for the people now. Hastinapur today resembles a city of the dead. We need to rebuild it, bring hope into our lives again. The end is the new beginning. And Vrishkathu and you are part of this new life. Vrishkathu probably, not me, she said with a slight shake of her head. I do not want to involve myself with any kingdoms and politics. I have refused to return to Pukia too, even though my father was very insistent. I am too tired of it all. I would rather devote myself to what I always did, trying to heal people. That is my way of healing myself. And Vrishkathu? Asked Arjuna, and Uruvi heard the genuine concern in his voice. He is the son of the finest archer and the greatest of warriors, don't forget that, Uruvi. He needs to be properly trained. Until now, he was under Karna's tutelage, and I hear he has all the makings of a great fighter. I would like to mentor him from now on. Please let me take him under my care. Krishna and I shall make him as fine a warrior as his father was. He will be my second Abhimanyu, he said simply, his voice heavy with emotion. Yes, Uruvi thought, it would be a new beginning. Arjuna was pinning all his aspirations and ambitions on her son. She knew that it was a tremendous gift for Vrishkathu to be trained by none other than Lord Krishna. She felt a wrench at the thought of parting with her son. He was her lifeline now. But she recalled the discussion she had had once with Karna, about how he regretted that he could never be Krishna's disciple. His son today had the good fortune Karna had been deprived of. But did she want her son to go through war and fighting and bloodshed? She did not, but for Karna's sake, Uruvi forced herself to be pleased about Arjuna's offer. He would have wanted his son to be under Krishna's care. He could not have asked for more. Picturing Karna's face glowing with pride and pleasure in her mind's eye, Uruvi found her resistance melting away. She smiled again, it made her feel lighter. I agree with Arjuna that Vrishkathu needs proper guidance and patronage, and who could be better than you and Lord Krishna? Uruvi assured them with a smile. Yes, I am gratified. She saw the quick look of relief flash between Arjuna and Krishna. Kunti looked pleased. But I cannot accept Yudhishthira's offer, she continued. Vrishkathu cannot be king. Neither will he be the heir apparent of the Hastinapur throne. You have been blessed with a grandson, Parikshit, Abhimanyu's son, and only he is entitled to the crown. How can you say that? Arjuna demanded. Vrishkathu is the older grandchild. And more importantly, he is the son of Karna, the eldest Pandava, making him the rightful heir. Uruvi shook her head decisively. No. I cannot accept this reasoning. It's the same story being rerun. I don't want history being replayed. We are paying the price for what happened 3 generations ago, and I couldn't bear a repeat of the same mistakes. There will be no future tussle and bloodshed for power. I want peace, not even the tiniest hint of a potential war. You are overreacting, Uruvi. You are depriving your son of his royal rights over an irrational fear. Reasoned Arjuna, then added more kindly, Parikshit is just a newborn baby, how can you plan for him now when you are not making a proper decision for your teenaged son? History will not repeat itself. I will take care of your son, Uruvi, I promise. I know you will. And I am sure so will all of you, and that's what I am so apprehensive about. In your misplaced affection for your nephew, Arjuna, you just might neglect your grandson. I won't let that happen. If not Hastinapur, someday my son shall be king of Pukia, I am not depriving him of that. But I repeat, I shall send Vrishkathu to you only on the one condition, that he will never be made king, she said resolutely, her words steeled with a firm finality that Kunti knew no one in the room could combat. Not even Krishna, who was unusually quiet throughout the conversation. So be it, Uruvi, he interposed quietly. Vrishkathu will not be the heir apparent. But we shall take him under our wing and do the best we can for him. Kunti looked at her nephew in surprise. Krishna must be as disappointed as they all were right now, but he did not show it. She looked at him narrowly, almost certain that he had some other plans. But Uruvi was not taken in by his quick acquiescence either. No, Lord Krishna. I want a promise. And I want it to be kept. Dear, you just said you don't want history to repeat itself, and here you are starting on a new series of promises and conditions. He smiled. I assure you, I shall comply wholly with your wishes. We shall leave now, he said. But remember, dear, the more you want to go the other way, the path that you were destined for is the one you will have to follow. He was as charmingly cryptic as always, Uruvi acknowledged with a small smile. As they were leaving, Uruvi noticed Draupadi lagging behind. She came close to Uruvi and said simply, "Thank you." But in those two words was a wealth of emotion. What was Draupadi thanking her for? To have kept her secret intact? Or was it because Uruvi had given her Karna's son to look after? Or because Arjuna had left this place a happier man? Draupadi pressed her hand with gentle fingers and Uruvi returned the gesture, feeling the sorrow flow through both of them. They had loved the same man, both had lost him forever, and now they would be mothers to his son. Uruvi watched the cavalcade of the Pandava chariots leaving her home. She stood motionless, feeling bereft. This was the same place on the balcony where she used to stand, watching Karna leave each morning. The same place where she stood waiting for him to return every evening, hearing his chariot coming down the path. She felt dry tears gathering behind her eyes and her throat tightening. Suddenly, she heard a movement behind her. She swung around, the anguish naked in her eyes. In front of her stood Kunti. "When will you stop hating me, my dear?" Kunti stretched out her arms and Uruvi did not hesitate anymore. She rushed into them, burrowing her face deep into her foster mother's shoulder, trying to wipe away the hot wave of sorrow and shame that overwhelmed her. She raised her head and looked mistily at Kunti, who had held her warmly so often but whom she had confronted so angrily and hated for such a long time. The barrage of tears burst at last. Uruvi felt the wetness of tears soaking her skin, her soul. Kunti gathered her in her arms and Uruvi collapsed in her lap, sobbing unrestrainedly, weeping her anguish out, grieving for all she had lost. She inhaled the familiar fragrance of Kunti's warm body and felt consoled, comforted. She knew now what it was to forgive. It was leaving hell and touching heaven. It was divinity.